Fleur continues her seduction of Sunset, and Sonata takes the drugs. Sonata then goes to the rehab. The end. Look, I shouldn't be. I know you probably think I'm being too harsh on this later part. Because you're probably all thinking, but Legend, there's this wonderful character drama. Shouldn't you be enjoying it? You should be happy that they found a way to extend the relationship past the I do's part. You should be happy and you should applaud that they actually are trying their best. The problem is, I would be fine with all of this. The drugs. The Fleur seducing Sunset. If only they did this before their climax. I've seen some of my riffers on the Riff of a Riff. And whenever I point out the rules of writing, they're like, there are no rules of writing. Well, if you believe that, get the heck off my channel. There are certain rules to telling a story. There are certain parts of it that you need to take to make a good story. I hate to tell some of you people this, but they are right. They are true. First of all, a story follows a set path. You have the start, then you have rising action, then you have a series of valleys and lows, then you have the climax. If we were to set that up in this story, then the rising action is finding Sonata, then the continuous story is Sunset and Sonata's developing relationship. The rise and lows are finding Aria and Adagio. And then the climax, the apex of the whole thing, is Sonata finding her dream, and then becoming famous and getting Sunset. It's clear and finished. But then you tack this on. And rather than feeling like it's a natural part of the story, it feels like the writer just threw this on just to extend it. Which leads to the other problem. Other parts of the story are things like themes, characters, conflict. The conflict was set up earlier. We finished it. End. The characters, relationships, ended. The theme about finding yourself, end. All of this finished. But then this whole second part comes in. And at first it might sound a little interesting, but then everything stops up when you realize that Sonata's already won. She's got her paintings in a museum now. She doesn't need hoity-toity anymore. She can get commissions for somebody else. Sonata and Sunset are obviously in love. We don't need this additional Fleur chick. It just feels so tacked on. Now, if the author had made this a separate story, made it a sequel, instead of part of the overall plot, fine. I'm happy. You could separate this. You could make this a part 2. I would almost prefer it. Okay, not completely. I have problems even going there. But I would almost prefer if this was a part 2. Look at 7 Days in Sunny June. And I know a lot of you have watched it. You just don't comment on it. But I know a lot of you have. Look at there. it separates its main stories into books. And still gives us the rising action, falling action, climax. So that way we can actually feel like something is accomplished in book 1, or something leads into book 1, that leads into book 2, that leads into book 3, yada yada yada. If they really wanted me to feel like this whole entire, oh no, I can't think of any stories or any paintings to draw, what's important, then they should have left out the fact that Sonata has her paintings in the museum. They should have set Sunset and Sonata's dating early on, so that way we can believe that Fleur is an opposing force. I also don't mind opposing and threats to a canon character's couple. Hell, that's a character on Spy Family. And I like her. The thing is, the reason why it works there and not here is because Lloyd and yours relationship in there is just starting. So there is still a possible threat. You now have Sunset and Sonata practically... No, they are living together. They're showing that they're very much in love. So, Fleur coming in, wanting her Sunset's body, does not make for an adequate threat. Everything here feels just so empty. I really do not care about these scenes. The whole drug thing? No. Because it also still doesn't make any sense. You could have found a way to employ this at the beginning, during Arya's problem. Again, substitute out the whole entire third act breakup and put the drugs in. But nope. You just have this. And it just doesn't work. And you know what? That's the review right there. The whole review, thick in a nutshell. It has a good first and second part. The third part is marred by the third act breakup. And then we got this tacked on fourth part that goes on for too long. Hoity-toity gets found out. Sonata breaks it off with him, leaves. The end. Sunset has a amicable separation for Fleur. The end. They meet up with Discord. The end. And they suddenly have this whole entire lead up to an incomplete fic. Yeah, you heard me. The story ends with a to be continued roundabout, and that's it. Nothing else. And again, it does thick wanted to do that so much. Then they should have taken this fourth part and made its own individual story. They should have made each of these their own individual story. Would have made it so much better, and it would have made me actually interested in what's going on. However, I am not, because you filled it up with this. And on their own, things like worrying about losing creativity and being forced to drugs, that is a fine possible conflict. If Sonata didn't already prove herself. If this was, say like Sonata trying to make her way into the museum, or trying to make an art gallery that could be the centerpiece, then that would be fine. But unfortunately, the conflict has a simple answer. It does not work. If Fleur's attempts on Sunset were happening anywhere else, it would be fine. But throughout every bit of it, we practically have Sunset going, nah, I'm not into Fleur. Nope, I'm not into her. Nope, not at all. If maybe we saw a little bit of Sunset being interested, but no, Sunset makes it quite clear. All she cares, all she wants is Sonata's booty. And after that, nothing else. This whole entire last part is void of substance because you had a climax. This is what happens when you put a climax this early. These whole entire 12 parts feel useless and ruins the flow of the rest. Now, the characters, still pretty good. Everybody's in character. Sunset works. Sonata works. And the idea of finding Sonata and of Ardazio and Arya again, that works pretty well. But after that, poof! I let myself caring less and less about this story as it goes on. You don't need 12 chapters to even talk about this. But nope, the story for some reason decides it needs 12 chapters to basically explain Sonata takes drugs. Hell, the whole Sonata plotline of taking drugs doesn't even last that long. She takes drugs in one chapter. Sunset finds out in the next chapter. The next chapter. It doesn't even go on for 3 chapters. Nope. It's chapter 1. Sonata takes drugs. Chapter 2. Sunset finds out Sonata takes drugs, puts her in rehab. Done! We've got story, people! Yeah! You know, most fics would take about 3 or 4 chapters to actually tell you this. But this fic decided to shorten that up. I am proud of that. No, I'm not. So, yeah. End of story. I'm going to read 7 Days of Saint June next. See you next time.